This is for the record. Nita and 4 of my grandchildren are burnt and shot up.
There's 5 kids sitting on the side of the road, got shot in the mouth, shot in the foot, shot in the leg.
The FBI is now investigating the murders of 9 American women and children in Mexico. The victims, all members of a Mormon community. They were ambushed last week near the U.S. border.
Walking all those miles was if there was anybody else out there trying to shoot me or following me. I was trying to hide myself as best I could under a bush.
We tend to think that cartels are busy killing each other and the collateral victims are minimal, but the reality is much darker. In Mexico, cartels are constantly at each other's throats and set to destroy anyone on the right side of the law. They also snatch tourists for ransom, pillage towns and villages as disproportionate acts of revenge, and unalive anyone they can steal from. That includes American families on vacation or living in peaceful parts of Mexico. This is the case of the LeBron family, who had settled in Mexico many generations ago. When 9 women and children were slaughtered by a Mexican cartel, everyone was left in shock and disbelief. What had they ever done to deserve such a gruesome end? Then came another plot twist. As the FBI looked through the case, they discovered a triple murder in Houston linked to this incident. What happened that day, and how did the LeBron's history tie to the 2019 tragedy? This story takes us back 130 years. Back in the 1890s, a large family named LeBron relocated from the United States to Mexico. They were a Mormon family, but they just had a big fallout with their church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You see, the LeBrons were a polygamous family, where every adult could have multiple partners. This went against the original Mormon ways, and the institution simply couldn't accept it. So the LeBrons had a choice: let go of their polygamous ways or renounce their LDS beliefs and practices. They chose neither. They decided to move to northwestern Mexico, where they could still practice their religion but live life their way. Skip ahead a few generations to the big LeBaron family in 2019. They had their very own community in rural Mexico, and lots of people knew them as that happy, rowdy American family. Other people attended their gatherings and practiced the LDS faith together with them. According to some reports, there were cult vibes to the whole organization. Nevertheless, the family was a peaceful one, and as far as everyone knew, they had never been involved with the local cartels. But in November 2019, their lives would be overturned in the most horrific way imaginable.
This is for the record. Nita and 4 of my grandchildren are burnt and shot up.
On November 4th, 2019, 17 LeBrons and relatives from their extended family were traveling in the Sonora region in 3 separate SUVs. They were going to a wedding. Everybody was dressed up and getting excited about what they were going to eat and what songs they were going to dance to. But none of the cars made it to the destination. One of the cars was stopped on a dirt road, and an army of cartel assassins surrounded it. They shot dozens of bullets at the car before setting it on fire. Donna, the mother, and 2 of her children died in the fire. Devin, one of the children who survived that incident, remembers how the attack began.
They just started hitting the car at first, like with a bunch of bullets.
Then, the sicarios raided the other cars and dragged everyone on the road while they stole the SUVs.
Afterwards, they got us out of the car, and they just got us on the floor, and then they drove off.
There's 5 kids sitting on the side of the road, got shot in the mouth, shot in the foot, shot in the leg.
The bodies are burnt inside the vehicle.
3 women and 6 children were unalive that day. It was 13-year-old Devin who, instead of breaking down seeing his mother die, decided to make a run for it and find someone to help them.
Walking all those miles was if there was anybody else out there trying to shoot me or following me. I was trying to hide myself as best I could under a bush.
Devin walked 14 miles, trying not to cry or despair. Finally, he reached his home and told his father everything. That's when his father phoned authorities and urged them to get to the scene ASAP.
Going through my mind was to get help because every one of them were bleeding really bad, so I was trying to get in a rush to get there.
If it wasn't for Devin, more people would have died that day. Devin also says his mother saved several of them as she urged them to get down and hide behind the bushes when the attack started. Sadly, it was too late for her to save herself.
And the car didn't work, so she was just trying right there, starting the car as much as she could, but I'm pretty sure they shot something so the car wouldn't even start.
She died together with her 2 younger sons, 11-year-old Trevor and 3-year-old Rogan. When Devin got home, his father sent a voice message on their family group chat.
We have Devin. He ran all the way home, and he says that the rest of the kids that are still alive are up under a tree.
To be honest with you, my boy's a hero simply because he gave his life for his brothers and sisters.
But before the family could rejoice for surviving the attack, there was a lot of shock and grief for those lost.
The whole thing was a bloody massacre, is what it was, on innocent lives. The most innocent.
The surviving children were flown to a big hospital via helicopter, then flown again to Arizona for more intensive treatment and rehabilitation. 2 babies died, but one of them, 7-month-old Faith, miraculously pulled through.
Christina's baby is alive. Praise God. We got Faith. She is alive. Do you understand me? God is so good. You don't even know.
Baby Faith is her name. She actually miraculously survived. And after hours and hours of being alone by herself in the car, they were able to find her.
Indeed, Faith was by herself in one of the 2 cars left at the scene. As the car was a burnt wreck, the family thought she was gone. But when more relatives turned up at the scene, one of them discovered a surprise.
I walked around the vehicle and opened the door, and there was a car seat, and there was a bullet hole through the canopy on the car seat. We opened the canopy, and the baby was smiling at us.
You might wonder why a peaceful Mormon family might want to start a community in a region dominated by violent cartels. Well, it wasn't always like this in Sonora.
And when I first moved there, our little farm there was a paradise for children, for families, and we lived really, really safe.
Throughout the previous century, more and more LeBarons moved to Sonora to grow their community, and it seemed like the perfect thing to do. Not only were they freer to practice their own LDS offshoot, but there was more nature, more peace, and they could afford to do more and build more. It was the perfect spot to grow a family. Over the last decades, though, Sonora also became the perfect place for cartels. That particular rural area is isolated from towns or police. They can produce narcotics and take lives they please. Meanwhile, more and more people suffer at their hands.
Here's a sobering stat. Despite the fact that El Chapo has been in prison now for more than 2 years, the violence in Mexico has actually increased, breaking a record 31,174 murders in 2017.
Sadly, Mexico has such a culture of violence that many people are accustomed to seeing shootouts and even bodies. Even worse, there's a culture of glorifying cartel violence. The narco corridos, a play on the Mexican genre corrido, are songs that paint drug lords as badass heroes. You can even buy El Chapo hats, but these are people that killed thousands and destroyed the lives of millions. So why would anyone glorify cartels in the country most affected by them? Well, cartel violence in Mexico started very early. In 1971, President Richard Nixon declared his famous war on drugs. He was the first to do so. Many more presidents would follow. But you know how the white powder epidemic skyrocketed in the US in the 1970s? Pablo Escobar had a role to play in it, and the United States was desperate to curb this addiction and the violence that came with the drug trade. To this day, not one war on drugs proved effective. In fact, after it officially started in Mexico in 2006, violence has only been on the rise. Why is that, you ask? Well, traffickers won't just stop producing or selling just because the government is threatening them with more prison time. They already know what they're doing is illegal, and the profits are so big that no threat is going to intimidate the kingpins. Also, the profits are so big that the government becomes interested in them. Reportedly, the CIA, the FBI, and even the DEA have allowed drugs to come into the US with various motivations: catch the big fish, stop another type of drug from reaching the country, and so on. In Mexico, several high-ranking politicians are in the cartel's pockets, earning a percentage of everything they make. And as long as officials are making a few cents for every dollar a cartel makes, they will protect, not destroy, the cartels. So, the war on drugs is not without some serious flaws. Mexico's Institutional Revolutionary Party, or the PRI, is notoriously intertwined with the Mexican mafia. The PRI has controlled Mexico's government for 6 decades and has consistently been accused of super high-level corruption linked to trafficking and organized crime. The ex-president's brother, Raul Salinas de Gortari, was arrested in 1995 after actively collaborating with the Gulf Cartel for over a decade. He'd made outrageous sums of money by protecting the cartel, all the while posing as a clean political figure. But back then, violence was at a much lower rate than it is today. You see, the PRI had a sort of unwritten pact with the cartels: cause no ruckus in the country, and we allow you to do your business. When the US started putting pressure on Mexico to sort out its drug problem, the PRI seemed to carry out such missions, filming and reporting success after success. But in reality, they were maintaining a good relationship with the cartels and presenting a few minor success stories to make it look like they were actively fighting them. This way, the government increased in wealth and power over the decades, and the US left Mexico alone. It was only when cartels actually started posing a threat to Mexico's population that the government thought they'd better start that war on drugs. By the 2000s, cartels got so rich that they had legit influence over the government and its people. Sadly, it was a bit too late to curb their growth now. The war on drugs means more violence against cartels, but cartels are better at violence than the government or the army itself.
The Jalisco New Generation Cartel took the fight to the next level, shooting down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade.
Today, there are entire regions in Mexico that are open war zones. People who can flee, and try to start all over again. Others continue to live there, hoping they won't fall victim to the conflicts, robberies, and kidnappings that plague their homes. After President Vicente Fox sided with the US to launch a program against Mexican cartels, the casualties only grew. Cartel kingpins started getting arrested left and right. For a few years, it seemed like cartels would come to an end. But something else entirely happened instead. Every time a cartel leader would get arrested, the cartel would crumble into smaller factions, all at war with each other, just like the Guadalajara crumbled in 1989, allowing the Sinaloa, Tijuana, and Juarez cartels to grow and kill each other. Now, there were dozens of such cases happening everywhere throughout Mexico. In a way, the war on drugs was inevitable, but it was also the sole cause of the terrible turf wars we see today. After Vicente Fox, President Felipe Calderón took over, and the violence got even worse. It was Calderón who announced an official war on drugs and gave the green light to every single government resource for this war. Still, the government was outnumbered and outpowered. Then, Enrique Peña Nieto took power, and he was part of the PRI. Take a look at what happened in Mexico while he was president. Yep, the violence skyrocketed to unprecedented levels. Year after year, the record for number of homicides in Mexico renewed. Almost 40,000 lives were lost in 2018. This is the context that the Laborons were in when they were massacred in 2019. Mexico had changed a lot since their ancestors arrived over a century ago, and it had changed even in the last couple of decades. The rural region where they lived in Sonora was not the type of place for a peaceful family anymore. But then, there was another discovery. Once the FBI started looking into the family history.
The FBI is now investigating the murders of 9 American women and children in Mexico. The victims, all members of a Mormon community. They were ambushed last week near the U.S. border. FBI agents are supporting the Mexican authorities' efforts to find the killers. And tonight, Channel 2 Investigates finds a link between that community and a triple murder here in Houston some 30 years ago.
On June 27, 1988, Houston authorities responded to 2 horrifying crime scenes. 3 people had been unalived execution style, 2 adult brothers and an 8-year-old girl.
We began to see a connection, and it became very apparent that they were related.
Before long, the detectives found proof that it was, indeed, the same culprits that had orchestrated both killings. They were blood atonement for the victim's sin of leaving the polygamous Mormon cult, the Church of the Lamb of God. Yeah, the 8-year-old girl was guilty of that in these people's eyes. The Church of the Lamb of God was founded by Hervé Lebaron under his leadership. The church became not only a cult, but a criminal organization.
Stolen cars, they were heavy into credit card abuse, forgery. They had actually done a couple of bank robberies also.
Here you might say sheesh, but no one is guilty of the sins of their father. The Lebarons who lived in Mexico in 2019 had nothing to do with Hervé, right? Well, as the FBI would uncover, they had a rather bizarre way of raising their children, a mentality left behind by the Church of the Lamb of God.
It's in the covenant, they know children that are disciplined and won't obey are to be killed. People who don't accept my leadership are to be killed.
And if the younger Lebarons said they did not know of Hervé's history, they would be lying, as his history is too dark to forget. In the 1970s and early 1980s, there was a schism inside the Lebaron family, and things got out of hand so badly that at least 33 people were unalived. Ervil died in prison in August 1981, but before he was arrested, he left a hit list for his relatives. Part of the hit list was the 2 brothers that were unalived in Houston. They had just moved to the city, hoping to escape Ervil and his gang.
Brother Dwayne was lured to a vacant house in the 6,000 block of Arena and killed. Tragically, Dwayne's 8-year-old daughter, Jennifer, was with him.
Shot her once in the mouth and once in the temple.
The triple homicide was the last in a long string of horrific crimes done by Ervil's so-called church. 6 members of the church were arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, and charged for the gruesome triple murder. They sat in jail for 3 years in complete silence. None of them would confess or turn on each other. That is until another, LeBaron Cynthia, rang the authorities to testify to the 6 men's involvement. But you see, Cynthia lived in Mexico. Interestingly enough, the family war continued well after Ervil's arrest, and it was happening even on the other side of the border. Cynthia had just lost her sister Natasha to this war.
So Cynthia became concerned that, my goodness, I might be next on the list. I'm out of here.
It took until 2011 to arrest all those involved in Ervil's hit list and the 1988 triple slaying. That's just 8 years before the 9 Lebarons lost their lives in the Sonora massacre. Some people have wondered whether the family's violent history led them in some way to that fateful incident. It's hard to draw a clear line, though. Ervil's cult put the family at the center of a nasty war. It's true, but it was LeBarons unaliving LeBarons. The cartels were not involved. It's only speculation that the LeBarons living in Mexico might have had ties to the cartels. Just as well, a violent robbery scenario is likely, considering all Mexican cartels are known to do this. Following the 2019 horror, the Lebaron family decided to leave Mexico.
Not only have I lost a wife and 2 children, but I'm having to move the rest of my family with really no place to go at this point.
David, Devin, and the surviving members of the family gathered to lay their lost ones to rest.
The toughest part for me was saying goodbye. Yeah, it definitely was. Saying goodbye to 2 innocent lives that were cut short and a vibrant wife that lived life to its fullest.
Indeed, that's the most relevant bit. They were innocent, despite reports of questionable education and a cult-like community still furthered by this family. No one deserves the end they met. The tragic news traveled fast in the United States. It's almost as if a U.S. citizen has to die for Americans to realize just how brutal the situation is south of the border. At the time, President Donald Trump tweeted,
"If Mexico needs or requests help in cleaning out these monsters, the United States stands ready, willing, and able to get involved and do the job quickly and effectively."
This is the time for Mexico, with the help of the United States, to wage war on the drug cartels and wipe them off the face of the earth. President Obrador said Mexico could handle the situation on its own.
I'll speak with President Trump to thank him for his support and see if in cooperation agreements there's the possibility of getting help in cases where it's necessary. I don't think we need the intervention of a foreign government to deal with these cases.
The Mexican government has been adamant that it's perfectly able to control its cartels on its own, but time and time again, foreign media says it's otherwise. For example, when El Chapo escaped prison in 2001, the American government insisted that they helped in arresting El Chapo and extraditing him to the U.S. The Mexican government refused, saying it would be 100 years until they let El Chapo do prison time in the U.S. They arrested him again, and in 2015, he escaped again. Of course, after his 3rd arrest, he was sent to the U.S., where he is now rotting in prison. When El Chapo's son, Ovidio, was arrested in 2019, the Sinaloa cartel rained fire on authorities and civilians until they intimidated the government into releasing Ovidio. This, again, did not sit well with foreign journalists, who commented that the cartels are in control of the government, not the other way around. When he was arrested again in 2023, he was kept in jail, despite the same response from Ovidio's cartel. Afterward, he was extradited to the U.S. to face a similar fate as his father. It seems like the Mexican government is learning from its mistakes, but many of the cities are still constant war zones, and the death toll is no smaller than a few years ago. Will cases like the Lebarons make a positive change someday? What will it take? Hey, thanks for watching. What do you think will take to make Mexico a safer place? Let me know in a comment, and before you leave, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.